Today we're going to be talking about a question I get all of the time, and that is, can I do my own S-corporation tax return? My name is Tony Cameron with TLDR Accounting, and we provide tax and accounting services to therapists and small business owners. Now, S-corporations. Normally, it's a big step once you get to a certain point in your business. So your business is taking off, you start making a good amount of money, and the thought comes along about, well, what can I do to save on my taxes? Or maybe you hear someone talking about it in a private Facebook group about, oh, I did this in my practice. It was great for me. Now, there are a lot of things to look at if you should be an S-corporation, and we talk about that in some different videos and articles. But today we're going to talk about, can you do your own S-corporation tax return? So if you already pass all the thresholds that I talk about, you know exactly what's involved, and you're like, all right, can I DIY this? My recommendation is no. Normally, I'm very honest when someone can go do something in one of the tax preparation softwares and can handle it on their own. But one of the things I include in my analysis, and if you should be an S-corporation, is there enough tax savings to then pay for tax preparation services, planning services, and payroll services? So if you're at the point where you're making enough money that being an S-corporation makes sense, you should be making enough money that you can outsource these tasks. Otherwise, it's cutting into the time you would normally spend either with a client or providing your services. So it's one of those things where it's like you're making so much money, but you can't afford to outsource this, and instead it's going to cut into your time. That's a no-go. In addition, an S-corporation tax return is a complex tax return, meaning it seems like it's pretty simple. It's just your profit and loss and you're good to go, but that's not the case. So as I've talked about in other videos, there's things like accountability plans and then reasonable compensation. So an easy thing that we see screwed up is a W-2 coming into an S-corporation. So a W-2 is where your compensation would be recorded, and because you're an S-corporation, there's certain things that are required to be on it. And so that goes back to the, can I do my own tax return? And the big thing is, a lot of times it isn't as simple as it seems. There's a lot of moving parts and things to keep track of. So what makes an S-corporation tax return different from doing your own Schedule C? The biggest difference, like do not pass go, is with a Schedule C, you don't even need to report anything that's on your balance sheet. Now, an S-corporation tax return, there's a balance sheet, meaning they want a record of all of your assets and liabilities that the company has. Now, a lot of times you're small enough that you don't need to report it to the IRS, and you're like, oh, well, I can just leave that page blank, Tony. Well, basis. All of that is used to compute your basis, and that does need to be reported on your personal tax return. And you're like, wait, personal tax return? I was talking about your S-corporation. Your S-corporation tax return is a pass-through entity. And what that means is you prepare this tax return and then it generates a Schedule K-1, which gets reported on your personal tax return. And there's a lot of information that's required to be included with that K-1 that you need to prepare your personal tax return correctly. So already you can see how things are getting a little bit more complicated. In addition, I then get asked questions. All right, you convinced me I don't know enough to do a S-corporation tax return, but I'm getting this Q1. Can I just do my personal tax return, or should you be preparing that as well? My recommendation, if we're preparing your S-corporation tax return, we are going to prepare your personal tax return as well. Big reason is because there's a lot of information on that K-1 that if it goes into your return wrong, you're going to owe more money than you should. There are so many things to be keeping track of, especially with some of the new business deductions and making sure that information is put in correctly so you still get a really good 20% deduction, right? Like, there's a lot of information that deals with all of this. Now, it goes back to the, if you're like, I don't really want to pay for those tax preparations fees, those seem a little expensive, the question then should be going back to your analysis on if you should be an S-corporation to begin with. Because to be able to save money, you need to spend money. And in this case, becoming an S-corporation, while it can save you on taxes, if done incorrectly, you don't want the IRS knocking on your door being like, no, you did this wrong. You actually owe a lot more money. No one wants that, right? Like, that's a big no-no. And so in turn, if you have an S corporation, you more than likely should be getting it worked on and prepared by a tax professional. Now, I do have someone every now and then who is like, no, I'm going to self-prepare. I should be fine and I'm good to go. I don't need any help with this part of it. And I'm like, okay, that's up to you. Let me know if you need any help with it later on or if you get a notice or anything. But I do recommend that you work with a tax professional for an S corporation tax return. In addition, if I was you, I'd also have them work on my 1040. Folks are always asking, well, shouldn't my personal tax return go to someone else because you're working on the business? No. You want someone looking at the big picture because say you're the only business owner, your therapy practice is going great. I know what your business and your personal side look like because they're so intertwined that I can be like, hey, we can do this in the business and it's going to affect your personal taxes this way, which is great. It'll save you $2,000. So seeing the big picture here is very, very important. All right, I hope you found this helpful. If so, subscribe below.